Hello, BookTube. Hello, friends. Welcome to Lizzie Faye Loves Books. I'm Elizabeth, and I want to talk for a minute about book recommendations. Being on BookTube, book recommendations are a prevalent thing that we all think about. Many times we watch BookTube to get book recommendations, or we watch a channel because we like that person, but invariably we end up getting book recommendations. Myself, as a BookTuber, I enjoy telling you all about the books that I have read and enjoyed and didn't enjoy and things like that. And it always does my heart good for someone to say that they've read a book that I recommended and that they really loved it. Now, sometimes they'll read a book that I recommend and they don't like it, and that stings a little bit. But, we're all different. And of course, you know that anytime we get a book recommendation, our reading taste may differ from another person's. And even if our reading tastes are similar, sometimes we're going to end up on both sides of the coin when it comes to a book. And a lot of times we get our book recommendations not only from booktubers, but from family members or close friends or I don't even know. But sometimes you get them from people at a book sale. Have you ever been to a library book sale and you will be just going along and someone will pick up a book and say, "Hey, I've read this. This is really good. You should get this. I already have it, but you should get it." Have you ever been on the receiving end of that? Because I've may or may not have been on the giving end of that. But what I want to talk about today is coworker recommendations. Now, many of you know that I am retired. I haven't ever really spoken a lot about where I worked, and I'm still not going to at this point because it was rather magical and classified, but I've given you enough hints over the years that you could probably figure it out. Many people would say it's the happiest place on earth. I do live in Central Florida, and I have worked in the entertainment industry for over 30 years, and the job I did was just a lot of fun. It was grueling at times, but a lot of fun. And through it all, because my company was such a large company, sometimes you would work with the same group of people or a similar group of people for many months and sometimes years. I worked with people who I knew for years, even though we didn't always work at the same location. And then sometimes you would see a person one day and you may never see them again. But in the course of all of that, I have gotten a few book recommendations from coworkers that I have read that have really stuck with me. Now, these are not new books. I did not just do this as a project. I've been retired since February, or since December, and I haven't worked since the beginning of COVID at that job. So, and even the most recent one of these books that I'm going to tell you about is one that I read probably 5 years ago, and the rest of them were pre-booktube. But I still remember those books, and it's kind of amazing that a coworker who I don't really have much in common with other than the fact that we might work in the same location and not even do the same thing could give me a book recommendation that I would love and that would stick with me for as many years as it has. So I just thought I would go over some of them. Now, there may have been others over the years, but these are the ones that really stand out. I've got 5 books, and 3 of them, 4 of them I really loved, and one of them not so much, but I'm still glad I read it. And really the only thing that was wrong with it in my eyes is that there was just too much foul language. Other than that, I thought it was a very interesting story. There are other issues with it that I've heard other people talk about, but my main issue was the language issue. And then I've got one that I'm thinking of. I don't have it, that I remember some girls telling me about, and it was several years ago, and I still have not read it. And I hear about it on BookTube all the time, and I still haven't read it. So when I get to that one, you can tell me if you think I should read it, if in fact you have read it yourself. Okay, so let's get started. A couple of these books actually belong to my daughter. She wanted to read them, has read one of them, and I don't think she's read this one, but I picked up a copy for her after the movie came out because I read it a few years before the movie came out. This was recommended by a coworker named Ray, and I don't even know how we got on the topic of books, but we were walking out to our set location, and he started telling me about it. And I think maybe I'd ask him, have you read anything good lately or whatever? Because I've been bookish my whole life. Even before BookTube, I was very bookish and was always talking to people about books. And he told me about Life of Pi. And I think he had just finished it or was still in the middle of it. And it sounded so intriguing that I had to go and pick it up. I found it on audio at our library and I listened to it. Then later I picked up this physical copy because my daughter was interested in reading it. So, The Life of Pi by Yann Martel is about a boy whose I think his family owned a zoo. It was, I don't even remember if it was a typhoon or a hurricane. I don't remember all the details. You guys probably could tell me more than me. It's been years. But he ends up in a lifeboat with some wild animals. And without going into any more detail than that, one of them is a tiger. And to imagine being caught in a lifeboat out on the water. I remember now they were transporting animals in a ship, and I think a storm hit, and so he ends up in a lifeboat with, I think he's the only survivor, and these few animals. Anyway, the tension. That's what I most remember about this book is the tension, and I think I felt it more in the book than I even did in the movie. I think it's kind of a hard movie to portray because so much of this is internalized. You hear the internal monologue of the main character and his just everything he's thinking of and going through and the fear and just the survival. So this book has just really stuck with me over the years, and I'm really glad that I took Ray's advice and that I read it. And then the next one, I don't remember the person's name, but I remember where we were. I remember where we were working, and I think I had just finished reading Hunger Games, and I saw this person reading this book, and we were talking about Hunger Games, and I said, "Well, what are you reading?" And he said, "The Maze Runner." He said, "If you liked Hunger Games, I think you would probably like it." And he started telling me about how it's about this group of boys, and they're caught in this compound, and they can't get out. The only way out is through this maze, and they can't find their way through the maze, and it shuts. The doors get shut every night, and you don't want to get locked in the maze, and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, let me get that. Let me read that. So I ended up reading the entire series. And just the other day when I was researching and just reminding myself, refreshing myself on some of these books to get ready for this video, I saw that there were a couple of short stories that I hadn't read yet. So I picked one up and I read it. It was like 3 pages, just a little bonus story. And there's one that's longer, and it's called Crank something. I have read the original 3 of the trilogy and then the 2 prequels. And so now that I've noticed that there are a couple of other novellas, I want to pick up all of those. So anyway, I just thought it was a fantastic series. They did a great job with the movies. In fact, I think the Scorched Trials movie was really better than the Scorched Trials book. At least I enjoyed it more. And all of them are really good, but The Maze Runner definitely, even if you just read this and you don't read any more of the series, I think it's definitely worth picking up. It is so intense and just very, it's an adventure, but yet I don't know, it's a survival story in a way, and it is intriguing and fascinating. So I definitely recommend it. And one thing about all of these books, these are not the normal, I shouldn't say normal, these are not the average kind of books that I read every day. Although I do enjoy these kind of books. Y'all probably think of me as cozy mystery, women's fiction, Christian fiction, and none of these are that, just so you know. But they're all really good. So the most, well, let's see, I don't want to get to that one yet. The one that the one that I didn't especially like, let me just get it out of the way now. I don't remember who specifically told me about it, but I remember sitting in the green room one day at one of the shows I did, and somehow the topic came up, and I think it had to have been before the movie, because most of these I have read well before the movie came out. But I thought that the way it's laid out and the way it's all put together is so intriguing. I just wish it hadn't had so much foul language. And the book that I'm talking about is The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger. And I just was fascinated by it. to really just to craft a story like this and put it together so that the continuity is there, it's just amazing. It's mind-boggling, really, and the whole concept is mind-boggling. But I really did enjoy it, except for the fact that there was foul language. There were, I heard a few reviews and people talking about it, saying that they thought it was a little bit weird when he would meet his wife when she was very young, because he already knew that, you know, that he was going to be with her, and, you know, they were going to be in a relationship and married and everything. So, you know, that part was kind of weird, but all that aside, it was still very intriguing, and I'm glad that I read it. Now, I didn't own a copy of this until just a couple of days ago. In fact, I filmed the first edition of this video about a week ago, and I just hadn't gotten around to uploading it, and I didn't have this book, and I didn't have one of the others. Meanwhile, my library book sale, my local library had a book sale. Both the books I didn't have were there, and I grabbed them. It was fill a bag for $1, and I thought, even though I probably don't want to read this again, I may as well grab it so that I have it as a visual. And then the other one that I didn't have, I thought I did, but I may have given it to someone. This one I did really love, and I loved this one more than the movie, although the movie was okay. This is Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. The reason I read this is because one night at work, we were sitting around waiting for our last set, or waiting to clock out or something. I don't even remember. And one of the attendants that I was working with that day, we were just kind of talking about what we were going to do after work. And she said, "Oh, my uncle's in town. He's taking us out to dinner. We're celebrating that his book got picked up for a movie." And it was this one. Her uncle was Orson Scott Card, but I'd never heard of him at the time. This is several years ago. This book was out, but the movie was in the barely early stages. You know, it had just gotten picked up for a movie. So I asked her, I said, "Oh, well, what's the book? You know, who's the author and all that?" And I wrote it down, and I went and got the book. I read it, and I loved it, and I wanted to get back to work and tell her, and I never saw her again after that. Never saw her again. And, you know, I wanted to tell her how much that I really enjoyed the book. I then went on and read the second book, which is Speaker for the Dead, and then Xenocide. And there are other books. There's another companion series. There's quite a few books related to Ender's World, but just the book Ender's Game was such a good book. And I think it's a hard movie to do because, again, like what's the other book I was talking about? Life of Pi. So much of what goes on in the book goes on in Ender's head. It's really a big mind game, and that's hard to translate into a movie, but I think they did a pretty decent job of it. Anyway, I loved this book. I thought it was great, and I know the author has either made controversial statements or something. I don't know. I don't pay any attention to that. Judge me if you want, but I appreciate this for what it is. This is a work of fiction, regardless of who wrote it, and regardless of, you know, anyone's politics or religion or whatever. I just really enjoyed this book. So then, I think I have one more. Oh, yes. The most recent one. So if you have been following me since the beginning, you may have heard me talk about this one. This one was being read by a coworker at a show where I was working back in probably 2016, I guess. And I knew that she read a lot on her Kindle. And so every once in a while we would talk about books. I would ask her, you know, what she was reading. And so one particular day I said, "Oh, what are you reading?" She goes, "Oh, let me tell you about this book." She said, "It's about these people. They live underground in a silo that's like hundreds of feet deep and hundreds of stories deep. And there's only one window. And every year somebody gets picked, like a criminal, and they get picked as a punishment to go out and clean the window, and then they die." And I was like, "Okay, well, you know, that's enough. Let me read it." And so the book is Wool by Hugh, Howey. And that's all I need to tell you about it. It's just, it's so unique and so compelling. There is some foul language. I didn't feel like it was over the top. Well, I mean, I wrote in my Goodreads review that I rarely give 5 stars to a book that has a lot of foul language or that has any foul language, and that's very true. But I remember in one particular instance where it was used, and honestly, it really fit. The situation. It really did. And I just really enjoyed the book. It was very intriguing. I always love a good dystopian book, and I was just hooked on this book from the beginning. I have read the whole trilogy. There's a graphic novel of the first book, and I've read that. And there may even be some other bonus material or companion books that I haven't read. I'm not sure. But this book is the first one. It's called Wool. The second book is called Shift, I believe, and the third book is called Dust. Now, Shift is a prequel where it goes back in time and it gives us the story of how we got here. And then the third book, Dust, starts out where Wool is, only it's parallel. It is what's going on outside the silo. So it gives the parallel story and for like the first half, and then it continues where Wool leaves off and it finishes the story. So if you think that sounds interesting, you might want to give this a try. And then the last one, so those are the 5 books that that I've read and either loved, or at least I'm glad that I read them. All recommended by Coworkers. The only other one I wanted to briefly mention is a book that was recommended to me by a coworker who I just worked with a few times, and again, we're just sitting around in between sets chatting about books. And this one girl, I think there was a couple of them, and one had read it and the other one was currently reading it. And so I was just asking them about it, and they said the book is Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. And I still to this day have not read it. It's on my Goodreads TBR. It's been on my radar, but I just haven't felt compelled to pick it up. And so if you think I ought to pick it up, let me know. Is there a lot of foul language in it? I think that's my fear, because I know it's a thriller, and so much of the time modern day thrillers just don't appeal to me because there's so much foul language. But anyway, at some point I might still consider picking it up, but let me know if you've ever read Gone Girl, what you thought of it. So anyway, these are the 5 books that I have read and for the most part really enjoyed, and definitely have all stuck with me, that have been recommended to me by coworkers. Have you ever read anything that was recommended to you by a coworker? And if so, what did you think of it? Let's chat in the comments. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you're having a great day. Read a good book, and God bless you.